Great. So I'm gonna show you some of the basics about using Rhino. I really like using Rhino. I kind of feel like I'm playing a video game when I'm making little landscapes in Rhino. If you're into Minecraft, you know what I mean. Um, but Rhino, the stuff you can make is pretty much like you can make anything you can possibly imagine in 3D and 2D. It's just really powerful software. And I'm going to show you more how to do the manual techniques in Rhino. But there's also a parametric element to Rhino. If you have the Grasshopper plugin, I'll show you some examples of that, but we're not going to get in today's tutorial. Really what we're going to be doing is using Rhino to carve out landscapes, to carve out an urban form like Paley Park. The nice thing about Rhino is the visual. There's so many nice things about Rhino, right? But one of them is the visual aesthetics. Like one of the base materials that you can work with in the software is like plaster, which just like and when the light is rendered in Rhino, you can just see like the layers really nicely. It's really beautiful to use and to create in. And I don't know if you've come across Catherine Gustafson yet, but she was the designer of the Princess Diana Memorial, and before she designed that memorial, she designed it in clay and plaster, and often she does her landscapes in that before she does larger models. But to me, like working in Rhino is kind of like working in like a clay or a plaster medium. So it's fun. It's pretty enjoyable. Now, why do we use Rhino over other tools? It's because it's powerful, it's popular, it's pretty affordable for students. A student license is $200. I'm still using that same license. I recommend before you graduate getting it under a student license because it just becomes that much more expensive after you graduate. And once it's like a one-time purchase thing, once you buy it, you have that software. It's not like Adobe where you have to like keep paying every month for the software. So I recommend buying it eventually, but you can also get a free student trial version for like 60 or 90 days. I can't remember. I think Nadia talked you through how to do that. Okay, so another reason it's used is because again, like I mentioned, you can automate a lot of tasks. You can do things parametrically in Grasshopper. Again, on your own time, look into that. It's super worthwhile. And then the last reason I think it's a really great tool is because it renders curves really nicely. So unlike a tool like SketchUp or a lot of other 3D modeling tools, they have a hard time with curves. And when you kind of scale up curves, it doesn't always look great, but in Rhino, you can make curved objects really beautifully. It uses math and stuff to make beautiful curves. So I recommend Rhino for so many reasons. So just to give you some examples, how I used Rhino as a student in my early MLA, I had a partner, Stephen Shuttle, and he and I were inspired by coffee lids, and we basically designed like Yorkville Park based on like coffee lids. And yeah, Rhino was a key part of that. This was early on, but it was really great because it helped us like kind of pull up those coffee lids and put them onto the landscape and just like really play around with the volume of these shapes we were proposing. Here is, we're getting into like parametric now, but if you get into it, and I encourage you to get into it, you know, it's a little bit daunting at first, but you guys are like the tech generation, and you know, the BLA 2s now, there's a few of them that never even used Rhino before coming into this program, and now they're doing these really complex things in Grasshopper and doing parametric design, like creating these like beautiful parametric towers. You can do this. There's tutorials online. Just Google Rhino Grasshopper tutorials, and then you can just get a whole list of things you can potentially create. In my thesis, I used Rhino to do like environmental analysis parametric design. So I kind of measured the amount of sunlight different streets and public spaces in downtown Toronto got based on the built form or the buildings impeding that sunlight. So I was able to tell which time of year and what are the sunniest locations in downtown Toronto. And you can do crazy things like this in Rhino, where you automate your just outputs of your modeling, and then you can create these like really beautiful animations. So anyway, this is like getting really deep into what you can do with Rhino, but I wanted to show it to you just to give you an idea of how amazing this tool is. But when I first started using it, I felt like I had bricks on my hands and I didn't really know what I was doing, and I couldn't do anything. So hopefully this tutorial that I'm showing you today gets you over some of those learning curves, and you can learn how to start making basic forms in Rhino, and that's where it starts. Once you start learning how to make basic forms, you can make more complex landscapes, and then you can get into parametric design. Do it if you haven't already. And you know, you guys are so much more set up to do this than we were, because there's a whole team now at Guelph, like including Afshin and Nadia and a whole team of students that can help you get on board with parametric design. Anyway, let's start with the basics. Let's go over the interface of Rhino, and let's go over how to make basic objects. Let's get started. Let's just open up Rhino. Let's start a new model. So I just hit Control N or Command N for new once I'm in the Rhino space. The first thing you'll notice is that when you're in Rhino, you have 4 viewports. And at first it can be kind of confusing when you're working in 4 different viewports at the same time. But again, when you're working in 3D, you don't want to get lost in your model, right? And these 4 viewports help you navigate your model. So I'd like to just start in 2D and start with just like basic line work in top view, and that keeps things really simple. And then when I start pulling out surfaces and making things 3D, then I'll often use the perspective viewport. So you can easily customize the viewport size. You can also just focus on one viewport at a time by clicking these buttons up here. Let's go back to the 4 viewport by clicking this kind of window icon here. Okay, the next thing we want to do in Rhino is talking about the objects we can start to manipulate. So there's 4 objects we have. We have dots or points, we have lines, we have surfaces, and we have polysurfaces. And they're all self-explanatory. The first thing is a point, so let's type in point. And you'll also notice, like AutoCAD, which I'm sure you've started to use at this point, Rhino has a command line, so you can just type in point right into the command line, and you get that command point. So you can choose a location for your object and put your point down there. The next thing you can do is line, polyline, or curve. They're all kind of the same thing. They're just lines. So let's type in line, start line, end of line. Just follow the prompts in the command line. So first click was start of the line, second click is end of the line, and there you go, there's your line. Another way to draw a line is curve. So type in curve, hit enter, click down start of curve, click down your next point of the curve, and then you can just keep drawing your curve with dots and close. You can close that curve. When you close that curve, it becomes a closed shape. And when it becomes a closed shape, you can easily create a surface in that closed shape by typing in patch. So let's type in patch, enter. Now that's a closed shape. You can tell it's a closed shape because it's like a bolded line. Right now we're in wireframe view. So if you look at each of the viewports, you can change how you're viewing them to wireframe, shaded, rendered, all these things. You don't see anything in rendered because everything's a flat surface right now. Once we start extruding things, you'll see that. Another way to, I just deleted the surface within my curve here. Another way to add surface into a closed shape is typing in, so we talked about patch, we can type in planar surface, enter. That creates a really simple surface in this view here. Okay, so we've talked about dots, lines, and surfaces now. Now let's talk about polysurfaces, and I'm going to switch to the perspective view. And and I'm going to draw a polysurface. So what are polysurfaces? Polysurfaces are just shapes, right? Like a cube, so or a box. So let's just draw a box. Let's type in box, hit enter. Great. So now choose the first corner of my box here, second corner of my box here. Third corner is the height of the box here. So I have my box. And you may be wondering why it's see-through, even though it's a polysurface. Well, that's because in my perspective view, so I'm right-clicking that, I see it's still wireframe, right? So I want to change it to shaded. And then I can see now that I have a 3D object that's shaded. Now let's click on rendered. I can see now here I have a 3D object that's rendered. Beautiful, simple, easy. Great. So another thing I'm doing is when I'm orbiting around my shape here, the box, I'm holding down control or control on a Mac. I think it's a control on a PC too. Holding it down, and I'm clicking, and I'm just panning or orbiting around my objects. So you can do that pretty easily when you're in the perspective view. Okay, let's go back to my 4 viewports. Let's kind of hide or minimize the perspective view and go back to the top view. Just go back to some of the basic interface of Rhino before we start actually drawing more shapes. Because there's still a lot here we haven't covered, and you're probably like, oh, there's so much. Where do I start looking at? What do I start clicking on? So I'll just talk a little bit more about the interface first. So you'll notice when I click an object, I get this like really rudimentary kind of shape here, which contains like arches and arrows. And this all does something, but what this shape here is called is the gumball. So I have a menu up top that says Grid Snap Orthoplanar Smart Track Gumball. Gumball, if I turn it off, the gumball disappears. If I turn it on, the gumball comes back. The gumball is really important. I'm just going to delete these so they don't get in the way. I'm just going to click on my cube here. And I'm going to show you what all the gumball does. It does a lot. Because you're working in 3D, you want to be able to control the direction which you manipulate objects in, you move objects in, because if you don't, you can just like send something to where you don't want it. So the gumball helps you fix things, fix the movement and the change in things based on direction. So let's actually go to the shaded view, because I get my X, Z, and Y axis in the left-hand corner, so I can see what's what and where I'm moving things. So the blue, it's a blue arrow, it's pointing up, and if I click it and drag this arrow, that helps me move things up and down along the Z axis, and it's fixed only along the Z axis. So even if I try and bring my mouse over to the left, when I click and move the mouse, the box moves up only. The next thing is let's click on the green arrow, move it. So that fixes it along the Y axis. And if you click on the red arrow and try moving things, that fixes your movement along the X axis. The other thing is you can move things by a specific amount. So if I click on the red arrow, just click and release, it asks me the distance to move in X direction. I can change the distance to, let's say, 10. That moves the box over by 10 meters. Okay, while we're there, let's talk about how I knew that was meters, right? This is something you should always double check. Always double check your units when you're working in a software, like Rhino, and you just want to be able to draw in the proper scale when you're working in Rhino, and then export your drawings at a smaller scale when it gets time to that. But you always want to try and draw in real dimensions when you have the option. So to double check your units, go to Rhino, go to preferences. Actually, it's not under preferences. Go to settings. So file settings, and then under units, here you can see that I'm in meters, which is great. You'll tend to work in meters, although if you're working in smaller scales, maybe you want centimeters. Maybe you're working on an imperial project, you want to work in inches and feet, whatever. Change your units here. The other thing that there's lots you can do here, but the other thing I'm going to show you right now is the grid. So you can see under my model, I have a grid, and there's thick lines and thinner lines in that grid. The thin lines are the minor lines, and they're every 1 meter, and the major lines are every 10 meters. So that I can easily just identify, okay, each little square there is a square meter. Each big square is 100 square meters. Okay, close that. Now while we're here, let's also talk about ortho and grid snap. So grid snap means when I want to move an object, it snaps the object to the grid. For example, I'm going to just draw a curve. When grid snap is on, the point of my curve has to be on one of the intersections of the grid. You can see that, right? When I zoom in really close, each line is being stuck to an intersection. Each little like arrow is being stuck to that intersection. Okay, great. And the next click I put down will also be stuck to one of the intersections. Great. Now let's turn on ortho. What ortho means is any line you draw can only be drawn along the cardinal direction. So 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, etc. Right? Ortho means you can only draw up and down and right and left along, it's fixed. Okay, great. So now we've talked about the other things. You don't really have to worry about planar and history. You can open up, and you can use those if you want to. I mostly just use grid snap, ortho, and gumball up here. Okay, let's finish off talking about the gumball. We're spending a lot of time on it, but honestly, when you start creating these objects, you'll see how important this gumball is. So in addition to moving the gumball along your Z, Y, and X axis, you can also see this little grid here, blue and green grid. If you click that, that lets you move your object fixed among the blue and the green axis only. So it doesn't move your object along the red axis or the X axis. The other thing in your gumball is you can rotate your object. Because ortho is on, when I rotate my object, it's rotating only on 90-degree angles. So I'll turn that off, I'll turn ortho off, and I'll click the red arch, and I can rotate freely now along the y-axis, along the axis. Let's choose the green arrow and click and rotate. That lets me rotate my object even farther. And let's click on the blue. That helps me rotate the object on this axis. Great. There's a couple more things we didn't talk about here, and that's the red square, green square, and blue square. If you click and drag these squares, that manipulates your object in those dimensions. That's all. So that's almost everything the gumball does. Play around with it on your own time. It's a lot of fun to use. All right, so I deleted that. shape, and let's actually get started with bringing in the Paley Park base map and making sure it's the right scale, and then we'll start tracing it out using lines and surfaces, and we'll start creating a really nice landscape there. Before we continue, does anybody have questions? Okay, great. So I'm just gonna look at my Paley Park base map here. I have it in my folder system. It's a JPEG file, and I see that it's drawn out like this. Pretty good, pretty simple base map. So let's bring that into my model. If you were bringing in an AutoCAD model, you would probably use the command insert. And you can select your AutoCAD model to bring in. But if you were since we're working with the JPEG file, we're going to type in the word picture. So I type in picture into my command line and it brings up my filing system, and I find the Paley Park base map, JPEG, enter. And then now just keep following the command line. The command line says first corner of picture. Okay, so I'll just click here at the intersection. That's where I want my first corner of my base map to be. Click other corner. Let's put it just here for now. It doesn't matter where you put it, because you're gonna scale it properly now, right? So congratulations. If you're following along, you have your Paley Park base map in your model. Now let's scale it up properly. It's really easy to do, right? Because you have a bar here. This says 3 meters. My units in this model are 3 meters. Each of these squares represents 1 meter. So I'm not far off. That's about 2 meters now. But I need to scale it up, and I'm going to type in scale here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to click on where I want it to scale, and you'll notice because grid snap is on, it's snapping to the grid and not letting me click on the actual bar itself. So let's turn grid snap off. Let's click on the corner of the scale factor. Just click your next point here, and then you can scale it up. But since you know the direction and the dimension of that as 3 meters, just type in 3. And there you go. Now you have your base map at scale, and you can just double check that by typing in distance. So type in distance, click here, and then click here, and then you can see your distance is about 2.98 meters. It just was a margin of error probably with my click, but that's about 3 meters, which is great. So congratulations, you have your base map in, and it's to scale. Before we start drawing, here, I just see a question in the chat. Would you do the same steps if you had a scale bar? Yeah, definitely. You can use the same steps because what really matters, the 3 meters is this distance along the bottom. So if you had a scale bar that said 3 meters is this distance, and then the next block is 6 meters, and the next block is 9 meters, you're still using that scale bar and the scale command to do the scaling. It's easy. Okay, now before I start drawing anything, I want to make sure that everything's in the right layer. So I'm actually going to create a new layer, call it base map. And again, if you're used to AutoCAD, you're used to putting things in the proper layer. And again, for your filing and when you get big complex models, you want things in the proper layer because that's how you control layers that you want to turn on or off for export and for rendering, or whether you want to like select all objects in one layer, or you want to change the colors of all objects in one layer. Like your layering system will help you do all that. So I created the base map layer. My object's not there yet. I have to move it there. So I click my object and I see in object properties, I can move the layer to base map, which is great. Another thing I should do here is I want to lock my base map down so I can't click and drag it around, which is really annoying. So I locked it by clicking the lock icon in my layers. Great. So you're getting there now, right? You have a base map. This is the fun part. This is where you start just tracing and drawing. So before we go too crazy with pulling things into 3D, I'm just going to do some basic line work in 2D, and then we'll move it to 3D. So let's give it a shot. Let's just start drawing. Let's just start drawing shapes. I'm going to draw actually rectangles. So first thing I want to do is, and actually before I draw, let's go back to Google and let's look up Paley Park. Because this base map, it shows you things in 2D from plan view, but I don't know what it looks like on the inside, right? So let's go to Google Images of Paley Park and just see what it looks like. This is a pretty good one that lets me see kind of the space overall, right? There's stairs, there's ramps on either side, there's these big gatehouses and gates, and there's these big, tall, skinny honey locust trees and planter boxes, and seating and a water feature, and then foliage growing along the walls. So just, don't assume anything from the base plan. Make sure you like understand the space you're trying to build in 3D too, and just doing a simple Google image search will help with that. Okay, so now let's start tracing. Let's do this platform first. So I typed in rectangle. First ask in the command was first corner rectangle. So I clicked up the top left. Next action is other corner or length. So down here, done. So I have my rectangle there. Great. I'm going to draw the steps now. I'm going to just, again, use a rectangle. From here to here. Great. And then I'm going to use the gumball actually to do the rest of the stairs. I'm going to hold down Option. And I have my second stair here. I'm going to hold down Option, and I have my third stair here. Going to do that one more time because I think I didn't hold down Option and I just accidentally got rid of a stair. Yeah, okay, there we go. There it came back. Great. So now I have my 3 stairs. I have the platform. So let's actually go into perspective now and zoom in and let's see what we're working with here. Let's hide the base map for a sec. Okay, so that's exactly what I just drew, right? So there's a couple of things I can do from here. I can actually type in extrude curve. So extrude curve, and that'll help me extrude this curve up and down. So let's actually do it with the first step first. Let's extrude curve. Click it. Curve, type in extrude curve, and let's move it up. It's kind of up to you how high you want to move it up. But it should be the height of an actual step. I'm just going to say 15 centimeters for now, right? So 0.15, enter. Great. This next one, I'm going to click and I'm going to type in extrude curve. Extrude curve. I'm going to make this one 0.3, 30 centimeters. Great. I'm going to click that step. And instead of typing in extrude curve, I'm just going to hit enter, because by default, it remembers my last command. And when I hit enter, it repeats that command. I just want to type in a different number here now. So I'm going to type in 0.45. So I have that step. I select my platform here. I hit enter and I get extrude curve again. And let's make this one 0.6, 60 centimeters high. So there we go. There we have our stairs and our platform now. Pretty simple, right? Now, if you remember, there were ramps on the sides of the stairs. So we're gonna draw those ramps in. It might be a little more complicated than the last step, but really it's not that complicated at all. So there's a couple ways we can do ramps. So everybody might have their own way. I'm gonna start simple and start doing it with basic line work. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just draw a line. I want my line to go there, from there to there to there. Great, so I drew like a straight line to the top of that. I'm gonna just type in line again. So I'll draw a line from my last line to here. Great, and then I'm gonna type in line again. I'm going to draw a line out from here to here somewhere, but I don't know exactly how far it should be. So I'm going to actually bring my mouse over to here, hold it there for a sec, and bring it back over along that line to here. Did you see what I just did? Like I used the corner of the stairs as a reference point. So my next end of line knew what that reference point should be, and it remembers that. I'll click down. There we go. There's my line. I'm going to type in another line here. I'm going to draw a line like that. Okay, why I want to do that is there's a really easy command to use called loft that draws a surface between two lines. Really easy. I'm going to just type in loft like that. And there we go. We have a loft. And that's your ramp, right? It might not be AODA certified. So just be aware of that when you're designing real landscapes, but for the purpose of your model here and just understanding volume, it should be okay. And then to fill up this space, there's a couple of things you can do. You can use poly surface, or let's just type in polygon. Oh no, we don't want polygon. Let's actually just use polyline. So I type in polyline. Polyline, what's a polyline? It's a line with multiple parts, right? So I click here, click here, click there, click there. Now I have a closed surface. I click that. I have my curve. And again, a curve and a line are all kind of the same thing in Rhino, but it's closed. So I can type in planar surface now. And now I've closed my ramp on this side. So really straightforward. And you can just do it again here. I'll do it again exactly the same way just to show you how easy it is. So I'm going to type in actually polyline. So I'm going to first start here. I'm going to go up here. Going to go 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 there. Whoops. Okay, sorry, I didn't click down. So I'll just keep it simple. I'll start with line. Great. Simple line. Go again. I'll draw a simple line here. Great. I'll go again and draw a simple line here. And before I draw my second point on that line, I'm gonna use the end of the platform as a reference so I know where my second point of the line should go. Should go about there. And then again, I'm gonna use loft, type in loft. I'm gonna loft from this curve and I'm going to hold down shift and select that curve and hit enter. And then I have a loft. Oh, let's try again. Curve, loft, from here to here, enter. Okay, so you see what it's doing? It's lofting from it's lofting between the two lines, which is great. But because I drew the two lines from two different directions, it is like twisting the surface. So you don't want to do that. To avoid that, just keep things simple and draw lines in the same direction, just like I did on this side. Okay, that just keeps things simpler. But anyway, you can use loft, you can use patch, you can use planar surface, you can use all these tools to then start creating surfaces and objects. Okay, so we've gone from simple line work to making objects in 3D. Let's just delete that for a sec and go back to our top view and turn our base layer back on, and just talk through how you would pull objects and create those shapes for different objects here, right? These are the gatehouses. So to do the gatehouses, I do the same thing. I just draw the line work, make sure my line work is closed, and then type in extrude curve, and then that'll help me extrude my curve up to that line work. Should we just do it together? Okay, let's just do
Sure,
it.
you could do that, Matt, and you could show it to cap it so that it's capped at the top too.
Okay, sure. Okay, let's do that. So I've typed in rectangle here. I click the 2 points of the rectangle, hit enter. Let's go back to my perspective view. Let's turn the base map off for a sec, just so we have more clarity on this object. Let's type in extrude curve. And now some of you, your extrude curve settings in here in the command line might not say, have a check mark next to solid, right? If you don't have a check mark next to solid, let's see what happens there. So I'm extruding my curve, hit enter. And then you can see my extruded curve doesn't have ends. So if it doesn't have an end, you can just select your object and type in cap. And then suddenly your object has caps on both ends, which is great. That helps you. But if you want to avoid having hollow items all the time, I would use extrude curve, right? And turn on solid in your command line for extrude curve. And then that way you have closed surfaces all the time. Okay. So this is a gatehouse, but what if this gatehouse was like a building, right? And when you're doing your 3D models, you want to make sure that you're not just showing the park itself, but you're showing like a little bit of context around the park, whether it's like the streets around or whether it's like the built form and the buildings around the park. You want to give some context. So when I did Paley Park here, I just wanted to give some context for like the buildings next to Paley Park, and because Paley Park is an enclave in between buildings, maybe you want to do some of the buildings around three sides of the park. It's kind of up to you for what you think feels right. So yes, this was a gatehouse, but I'm going to just show you how to like carve out windows and doors into this building, so you can imagine how to use all this to make the buildings around your landscapes. Okay, really simple. You're just going to create shapes, and you're going to use those shapes to carve out of other shapes. So first of all, I have a block here. I'm going to use my gumball to actually duplicate that block. I'm going to shrink that block, and I'm going to turn it into the size of a window, and then I'm going to subtract that from this object carve it out of this object, and I get a little window. I'll show you how to do that. So I hold down Alt when I click on the green arrow in the gumball, and I get to duplicate my object. And then I'm going to shrink this object using the green squares and the red squares and the blue squares, all of that. And I'm going to bring that object into my building where I want to subtract from. So I want to subtract it from up here. It looks starting to look like a Lego piece, right? With one little notch. But I actually want to subtract that because it'll be a window from that building. So I'm going to type in the command Boolean difference. Boolean difference means subtract from. So just keep following the command line. The first ask is select surfaces or polysurface to subtract from. So I want to subtract from my building, hit enter, select surfaces to subtract with. I want to subtract with the window, hit enter, and there we go. And I now have my first window in this building. And if I go to the rendered view, I can see that more clearly, right? But let's go back to shaded, and let's hit undo, because I want to actually make multiple windows that I want to subtract from in this building. So I'm going to duplicate this window. I'm going to hold down Alt, duplicate that window a few times, right? I'm going to do it again this way. Hold down Alt with the blue arrow, do it again. Hold down Alt, do it again. And then now for the door, I'm going to make the door a little bit longer. Makes sense, right? It's a door. You need to walk through it, make it taller, put it in the right place. Now I'll show you how to use Boolean difference here. So just type in Boolean difference. So command is select objects to subtract from, select from the big object here, select objects to subtract with. I'm holding down shift as I'm selecting all of my windows and doors, hit enter. And now I've carved out all the windows and doors for my building, and I go back to rendered mode and I can see that. Now the proportions aren't like perfectly right, so you'll have to like play around with it yourself and figure out what the actual measurements and dimensions are. But I'll leave that up to you. You know how to work with the units and lines now. So yeah, that's that. Any questions so far? Let's just start with like regular lines and use them as reference lines. Okay, so say I want to, here, I'll just start again. I'm drawing a polyline just like that. And I want to draw another dot on my polyline right here, kind of at the same level as the dot on the left. So I'm actually, instead of clicking on the dot on the left, because I would close it, I'm just going to bring my mouse and hover over that dot on the left, over that point, and then that point becomes sticky. So now that point creates these like horizontal lines as guides that help me create a second dot along that horizontal line. Does that make sense? I'm just going to check the chat. I think that makes sense for everybody. I think that answered your question, right? It's just hover over the dot to get the guide, and then hover over that dot again to get rid of the guide.
I
Okay.
think that was good, Matt.
Okay. Great. Yeah, Andrew. I think that answered your question. Should we take a break?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's start to draw some trees, just so you have some idea how to do that and add them to your landscape. We'll just keep it really simple. Let's start with deciduous trees. let's actually draw deciduous trees. Let's start with coniferous trees. Um, and let's use pyramids to draw those coniferous trees. So I have pyramid. I typed in pyramid into my command line, or I selected it from the menu, and I can just draw the points in that pyramid. First point was the center, second point was the side, third point is the height of the pyramid. That's my pyramid. And so to make kind of like a pine tree or a spruce tree or Christmas tree or whatever, I just want to make like multiple layers on this pyramid. So I'm going to hold down Alt. I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I get a second tier. I'm going to just make it a little bit smaller by holding down Shift and clicking the red little square in the gumball. That makes it smaller, and I'm going to rotate it. So, trees aren't perfectly the same all the time. So each layer I just want to rotate to make it look a little more natural, even though it's a pyramid tree. I'm going to hold down Alt again, click up the blue arrow in the gumball, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, manipulate the shape, just to make it a little bit more interesting and rotate it. Okay, so I'm going to look at that in my rendered view now. So that's what it looks like. I'm going to just increase the height of that. It looks pretty good, right? So again, you can also like make a 5-sided or a 6-sided pyramid, whatever you want. You also probably want a base to the tree, so it might be a little bit hard to put a base of the tree in 3D like this, but let's try, and if it doesn't work, I'll show you how to fix it. So let's use cylinder. So I typed in cylinder. I click on where I want the base point to be. I click on where I want the outer edge of the cylinder to be, and then I click on where I want the top of the cylinder to be. So now I can see I drew my cylinder here. When I was drawing it, I thought it was in the right place, right? But because it's in 3D, you rotate a little bit, and it's actually in the wrong place. And you can use the gumball to try and put it in the right place, which is totally possible. But this is where the different views help. So now I'm in my top view, right? So I go back to the grid view. I can actually just put it into the center, into the right place. So from top view, it's in the right place, but from my perspective view, it's kind of just sitting in the middle of the tree. So actually I want to go to my right view and zoom in and move the base of the tree down. And then suddenly I have a tree with a proper trunk, and I go back to the rendered view, and I can see that more clearly here. So that's how I'd recommend doing deciduous trees, or there's so many ways you can do things. So do things however you feel is right. But now that we've done that, let's start drawing some deciduous trees. So I'll go back into my shaded view for that. And let's start drawing deciduous trees in wintertime first, so with no foliage, just so we can focus on the branching structure. Let's actually use cone for that one. So I'm going to just draw a cone, right? So that's going to basically be the main stem of the tree there, right? And now to do some more of the branching, I'm gonna actually use the gumball again and just duplicate this cone shape multiple times to create more of an articulated branching structure. So I'm gonna hold down Alt, hold down the up thing. I'm gonna decrease the height of the second cone that I'm drawing. I'm gonna decrease the width of the second cone too. And I'm just going to rotate myself a little bit here, rotate the object like that, and kind of just bring the object into the right place. let's say I kind of want it there, but maybe a little bit farther down there, right? So that's my second branch of the tree. I can do it again and again and again until I have like a multi pronged tree. So let's just do it again. Let's hold down Alt, up. Let's decrease the branch, because as a tree grows up, the branches get smaller as you go up the tree, probably. Rotate it a little bit. And then again, using these other views now, you can move it into the right place. Let's look at the front view. And if you don't have your object within a viewport here, so I'm in my front view, I click front view and I type in zoom. And then you see in my menu, in my zoom menu, I can hit S for selected, S. Okay, so now the selected item is within my view in the front viewport. Okay, and let's go back to the top view, zoom in here, make sure it's in the right place. Is it in the right place? It looks slightly off to the side. So that means we just need to put it into the right place like that. So there we're starting to have like an articulated deciduous tree, right? And then now from here, if you actually want to do like a deciduous tree canopy, be careful about it because it starts to compete with the volume of your landscape. So if you feel like a deciduous canopy is needed, and you could just do that with the tool called sphere, right? So I'm just going to type in sphere, click where I want to draw my sphere, and I can even edit the sphere a little bit so that, you know, it becomes more of an a funny shape like that. If I draw it too big, I can hold down shift and shrink the shape by the exact same dimensions it's in now. And I can move it to the right place, which is here, right? It just needs to move up. So now I have a tree with leaves. And then I'm going to show you one more thing here. If you want to just play around with the shape of the tree a little bit more and you don't want it to look like a perfect lollipop, because trees don't look like lollipops in real life, you can just type in points on, and that'll give you a bunch of these points on the surface to manipulate, and you can play with it even more. But that's not a lot of points, right? So when you move 1 point out, it like moves a huge section of the object out too. If you want more points, you can just type in rebuild when you have that surface selected, hit enter, and you can actually specify the number of points you want it to rebuild by, enter, and then you have a lot more points now to play with. So this is a fun one because you can start to imagine how you can draw more interesting shapes, and you can pull and push on them to start manipulating an object, kind of like how you're actually working with like clay. So I advise you to do that in your own time, and that's kind of how I just wanted to show you this little art piece here that I made as a mock image in my Paley Park landscape. I drew a circle, I squished the circle, I created a bunch of points on that circle, and I pushed those points in to create this shape. Okay, now let's go back to our model here. It's kind of annoying to see all these shapes when all these points when you're done editing this shape. So if you want to get rid of those points, just type in points off into the command line, points off, hit enter, and then the points are gone. If you want them back, just type in points on and select the object you want points on for. Okay, so I hope that's helpful for you. you can really imagine now when you're playing with shapes, how you can use points and how you can use Boolean difference to carve into shapes, whatever you want to create. Was there anything else you wanted me to show, Nadia? Just I'll just show you how to draw these benches here, and you can use those same techniques to draw benches however you want. So okay, so let's delete that. Let's go back into top view. Let's actually start really simple and draw a bench with just like more hard shapes. Let's type in polyline. Okay, let's turn grid snap on for now. And then let's just draw like a simple profile of like a dining chair as an example. And this is a good example because it shows you how you can turn any shape into a 3D shape. So, okay, so I drew that, and I'll go back into perspective and I'll type in extrude curve and bring that out and rotate it. And there's basically like my chair now, right? I have a chair. So if you want to do a curved one, this is a little more fun, a little more complicated too. But type in curve. Just draw where you want the curves of the chair to be. But try and make it look comfortable and usable. Like sometimes I don't really understand chair designers, because if a chair is uncomfortable, it's like you have one job, right? You're a chair designer. This chair should be comfortable. But just think about that as you're designing furniture. The other thing we want to do now is use some AutoCAD like tools, like trim and extend, to create the legs for this curved chair. So I'm going to type in polyline. I'm basically just going to draw the lines where I want these legs to go. And then I'm going to select both of these objects and type in trim. And I'm going to just see how the lines in between my intersection of lines, I typed in trim and I'm clicking on those lines and they're disappearing. So I basically want all those interior lines to disappear. And what I'm left with is an object like this. There's a little bit of extra line. So I'm going to just select where I want to cut that extra line. Do you see that? If I zoom in really closely, it's there. I just type in trim and I get rid of that little extra line. Okay, now these are all kind of separate shapes. I want to close them all into one shape. I'm going to select all my lines here and type in join. So now this is one shape. I'm going to type in extrude curve. Right? Whoops. Extrude curve. I'm going to extrude it by, let's say, I want a bench that's 15 feet long, 15 meters long, big long bench. I do that. And there's my bench. Again, I didn't draw to scale, right? Try and draw to scale. And rotate it. And then there you go. There's your really long bench. And again, in Gumball, you can increase the width of that bench too. So it's really simple. And you just basically start by drawing any object in 2D and extruding that object into 3D. And then you're done.